Hello again, fellow audiophiles. I am Wave Theory, and today I have a review of the Kennerton Gjallarhorn GH-40 full-sized dynamic driver, horn-loaded dynamic driver at that, closed-back headphone with an MSRP of about $800 US right now. This unit was a loan from Audio 46. They have made no attempt to influence my opinion on this piece one way or the other, so all thoughts you are about to hear are mine and mine alone. So we'll go ahead and do shameless self-promotion, then we'll come back on the other side and get into my review of the Kennerton Gjallarhorn GH-40.
Hi, I'm Wave Theory's human companion, and he wants you to know that your support of this YouTube channel helps keep the reviews coming. If you enjoy Wave Theory's honest, thorough style, then make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and check out the links in the description below to sign up for the Patreon or send him a tip through PayPal. All right, enjoy the musings.
So I've been reviewing audio gear for about 2.5 years now total, coming up on 2 years for just the YouTube portion of this. And some way, somehow, this is my first experience with the brand Kennerton. So I was pretty excited to get this one in, and I have to say that on balance, it was a pretty positive experience with this headphone. I did enjoy it. It is not perfect, it is not for everyone, but overall I did really enjoy listening to music through this headphone. So we're going to unpack all of that here through the course of the review. And so what we'll do is we'll start with an overhead view of this one because the wooden cup and the laser engraving on it and all of that is really nice, and I want to be able to hold it up right up to the camera and talk about it. So we'll cut to that. We'll do an overhead view where I talk about build and specs and features, show you the cable and the packaging and that sort of thing. Then on the other side of that, I will make some comments on how well this works as a closed back headphone, so its isolation and all of that. And then we will talk about test gear and sound and do comparisons and all of that fun stuff. So, okay, let's get to it. We'll do an overhead view again so I can show you a close-up of these headphones and give you a look at the build, because these wood cups are really nice and are worth looking at up close. So let's go ahead and do that. So first of all, we see single bar headband here with a fair amount of padding up here on the headband. I really did not ever have any comfort issues with this headphone. They sat on the head well. They are rated to have a 360 gram mass, so they are not very heavy. The clamp is kind of in the middle and not super clampy, not super loose. They stay on the head well, but they don't pinch very hard either, okay, in my opinion. So all of that, it's a well-built, sharp-looking headphone. All that we have, I think these are leather pads here that are symmetrical, looks like, okay, and so forth. So, but anyway, let's look at that wood cup, because that is where a lot of this comes into. So what we see here is, so this is like the stock wood in the light color. I do not know what kind of wood it is. I could not see on Kennerton's website what kind of wood it is, although they just describe it as precious wood. So thanks for that, Gollum. Okay, and but it does look really nice. Like they just put like a polyurethane or some kind of sealant on it. Didn't paint it or anything. Just left the wood grain show. It looks great. We have the laser engraved Kennerton here, Gjallarhorn, caliber 40 millimeter, which means there's a 40 millimeter dynamic driver in here, which while I'm on that topic, it is a paper composite driver in there. And again, as I said in the intro, horn loaded. So something is going on in the inner workings in here that horn loads those drivers. Okay. Same look over here. Let's look at this logo right here. That is definitely the bat symbol. Okay, so don't tell DC or Warner Brothers what Kennerton is doing here, because they're going to get sued. Anyway, really nice looking headphone, comfortable on the head. We see a little bit of venting right here in the cups. And so forth. And then we have dual 3.5 millimeter cable entry, which is not completely flush mounted. It's also not recessed, but there's plenty of room to get most even fairly thick barreled aftermarket cables in there. Like, I didn't have any problem getting a wide range of aftermarket cables to fit. Like, the thickest barrel that I have, let's see, is it within arm's reach? Yes. Grab it here. What's going to spill out when I pull this free? Just another cable. Okay, anyway, this is the headphone end of my Corpse Cable Grave Digger, and this is probably the thickest barrel connector that I have. There's a little bit of breathing room with this part right here, but even these fit right in there nice. Okay, so anyway, that's it. It's pretty friendly in terms of using aftermarket cables, and like the way the cabling goes is it's definitely angled forward quite a ways. So like you really don't feel the cable sitting on your shoulders or anything like that, or catching on your shoulders when you turn your head, that sort of thing. On the subject of the cable, here it is. It is a 2-meter long, single-ended, oxygen-free copper conductor cable with a nylon braid coating on it. Okay, it doesn't really tangle. The nylon is nice about that, but you do see that it has some memory to it. So it kind of holds its shape a little bit, right, as you move it around and all of that. It's not too bad. We have the 1/4" / 6.35 millimeter single-ended TRS connector on the amp end. And then, of course, we have, dual 3.5 millimeter TS connectors on the headphone end. The only real complaint I have about this cable, like even the memory issue in it, it's like it's a little stiff, but not terrible. It still mostly lays flat on the desk. Is it's just a little bit too long, and it's not terminated in a mobile-friendly way. And I think that is a bit of a miss here. Like, I would have preferred a 3.5 millimeter plug here with a 1/4" or 6.35 millimeter adapter, because this is a 30 ohm, these are 30 ohm drivers in here, so they are low impedance, and they also come with a 115 decibel per 1 volt input sensitivity. These are very sensitive, very efficient, very easy to drive, and because they are closed back, they are light, they are low profile, I think they are fairly decent traveling headphones, and I think this is just the wrong kind of plug for the application that these fit the best for. For the use cases these fit the best, this is just a bit of a mismatched plug. So that's the only real complaint I have about the cable there. So let's look at the accessories that come with this thing. In the box, you get this very nice envelope. I'm telling you, bat symbol. Okay, and inside this envelope, you just get your normal literature, okay, certificate of authenticity, information, that's all Cyrillic. Okay, all of this cool stuff, warranty info, is there anything else in the, nope, that's all in the envelope there. Get this carrying pouch that comes with it, which is a really, really soft, well, it's on the outside, it looks like they, took a bunch of lumberjack shirts, cut them into these pouches. Okay, Kennerton audio equipment on the tag here, so very soft cloth on the outside, and then honestly that's not quite as soft or smooth on the inside, but you can stick the headphones in here if you want. Or you get this leather carrying case here. At least it feels like leather. It's a little too big to fit on the camera. Looks like a camera bag, and it might have been once upon a time. Zipper top here. Have a look inside. Okay, you can put the headphones in there too. Not super stiff or anything like that, so you don't want to set things on top of it. It might be just a little bit big to fit in a suitcase or a backpack. But it's not bad. It's got a nice handle on it. Okay, those sort of thing. But yeah, let's take one more close-up look at these wood cups. These are the star of the show here. Very nice looking. Very nice looking, and it keeps the weight down. I like how these are built. I like the overall fit and comfort, and they're not the most travel friendly, and I keep saying travel friendly because it's a closed back, easy to drive headphone. Like, put this in your suitcase, you know, use the case that's over here, but put it in your suitcase or your backpack, grab your DAP, get a little bit different cable, and it's a good travel companion to listen to in hotel rooms or wherever your destination is, that sort of thing. And all that. It's not really a great OTG because, and I'll talk more about this, the isolation isn't the best. So it's not super great for like if you work in a cubicle because there's sound leakage and all of that, and then, you know, it doesn't hold ambient sounds out, all of that well. But yeah, it sure does look good. Okay, that's enough of me rambling about that. Let's come back to me on camera talking about test gear and sound. Let's revisit my comments on what I said about isolation and how this functions as a closed back. My observation with this headphone here, and I'll show you why it's plugged in here in just a moment, but my observation of it is that it doesn't do a great job of holding ambient sounds out. Like, it still leaks from the outside in fairly well. But I said in that overhead clip just a moment ago that the sound leakage from the inside out isn't great, but I need to walk that back a little bit because after I said that, I was thinking that I needed to do one more check on that. And so I have a quick demo for you in terms of holding the inside sounds out, like how well does it do it. So I have it plugged into my N6 Mark II DAP right here, and I'm going to try to play you a little clip, and I hope this doesn't get blocked. If I keep it under 30 seconds, it should be fine under fair use. I'm going to play a clip from the band Glass Hammer. They're a prog rock band that is probably not well known, and I think instead of blocking me, they probably will appreciate the publicity. And the album is called The Dreaming City. I will put a link to it below, and I'm going to keep this quick. What I have done here is I have set these to about my reference listening level of somewhere around 72, 73 decibel average, as I can tell by ear. I'm going to let this play, hold it open, and then just push it closed gently, not really hard, but just enough that it creates a seal here. It's not quite like hearing it on the head, but it should be close. So let's do this. Let's see. Just hanging open here. Here we go. All right, and now close it. Just push them together. There's quite a bit of attenuation on there. Now, what is it like if it's just on my head? I won't be able to hear this, but we'll hear on the mic after the fact. And I'll cut it off there so that hopefully I don't get blocked, but hopefully we were able to hear what the, at least the leakage part of that is like. And I think it probably does a better job of holding sound in than holding sound out. So let's revisit that holding sound out part. Why am I saying this? So unplug, no music playing, and I just put it on. The attenuation, like there is some attenuation of ambient noise. I can still hear my desktop computer's case fan off to my left here a little bit, although it is much quieter than when I don't have these on my head. My own voice is muffled and like chesty sounding, so it's really attenuating a lot of the upper frequencies, and the only upper frequencies that I'm hearing are those that are mostly just traveling through my own head instead of in the air out around, I should say. And so, but it's still not great. So let me give you kind of an amusing anecdote when I talk about how the ambient sound, holding ambient sound out isn't spectacular. There's been some nice weather where I live, finally. Okay, and so I grabbed these in my Cord Hugo 2, and also this one right here. This is the Aurorus Australis, I think that's how you pronounce that, which is a $900 closed back, which a review is pending for. And I took them both outside and was just doing a quick, doing some comparison back and forth, just sitting out on the deck because it was such a nice day. And I was listening to Mountains by Hans Zimmer. And if you're familiar with that track, there are some quiet passages, and then there's these big brass swells, brass and pipe organ with descending bass line and all that in there. Well, in the quiet passages, there's kind of the instrumentation kind of does this tick, tick, tick kind of a thing that's supposed to sound like the ticking of a clock, I believe, anyway, because of the way the movie is. It's all about time dilation and that sort of thing at that point. Anyway, there's like a main click, and then there's a softer click after those main clicks in the track. I had these on and I was hearing a third click. And it was softer, and it sounded like it could be part of the music, but also not. It was a little bit weird, and I'd never heard it on that track before. And I'm like, these are not resolving enough. I mean, they have decent resolution, about which more in a moment, but like these are not resolving enough that, you know, my Susvara or my Utopia or whatever has missed that sound on this track before. Not going to happen, right? So what's going on here? I'm like, but it was just timed up, so it was like big click, softer click, about the same sound click as that softer click. What in the world is going on? And then I see up in a tree movement out of the corner of my eye, and you know what it was? It was a downy woodpecker pecking along just at the right rhythm to make me think it was happening with the music, poking at the tree branch, okay, trying to find the place that it drills, because no sooner do I see it than it finds a good spot and it does its rapid fire pecking into the wood. And I'm like, oh. But the point is, as the crow flies, like the direct line distance between that woodpecker and my head up in that birch tree where it was probably about 40 or 50 feet, okay? Which, let's see, for those of you on the metric system, what is that? We're talking probably in the 12 to 14 meter range, somewhere right around in there, okay? And I could hear that bird pecking at the wood there at the tree branch through these headphones on fairly low level, but I could still detect it. Now, the bird cooperated, and I was able to do a comparison with the Australis there just to see how loud the pecks were on that, and it was about the same. So about the same amount of isolation, I would say there, but still not great. All right, so bring that around to, does a decent job holding sounds in, it seems. Not as strong about holding external sounds out. Okay, so just keep that in mind if you are looking to use this as a closed back. I mean, if you're needing it for closed back locations, you might actually, if you keep the volume down a little bit, you might actually be okay in a cubicle situation. So that's something to keep in mind. But you'll probably still hear your coworker trying to ask you a question, which might be a good thing. All right, so now we will turn our attention to test gear and sound. Some of the test gear I've already mentioned here. My KN-N6 Mark II DAP with the EO2 module, you just heard a quick demo of. Also tried some other mobile solutions like the Heatus S9 Pro little dongle DAC, which I just did a review of, link down in the description for that. And let's see, Cord Hugo 2, which was fed by its matching 2Go streamer and then sourced from Rune. And then on my desktop, I tried this with the Gishelli J2S, which that review is coming in the hopefully not too distant future. I am working on it. I haven't forgot it. But anyway, J2S routed through the Lake People G111 Mark II. That got a fair amount of time running this one. I also tried this on the Gustard R26, which is feeding my recently acquired Headamp GSX Mini. And then I also tried it briefly on my signal chain of the Berkeley Alpha Series 2 DAC into my Vioelectric HPA V281 headphone amp. Those three desktop signal chains that I just described would have been fed by a Singer SU6 DDC, which was in turn fed by a Sonor Ultra Rendu streamer as a Rune endpoint. Basically, all of the music that I listened to through these things would have been either lossless files, lossless FLAC and local DSD files, or lossless FLAC Qobuz streams. Okay, the one exception would be I did use this with the S9 Pro, just playing Spotify to play around with the volume control on the S9 Pro, which I talked about in that review. So if you want to see what I learned there, watch that review. All right, so a fair amount of signal chains there. I think some of them, particularly the J2S and G111 Mark II chain, are like in a price range that like matches an $800 headphone fairly well and would be like kind of like the real world kind of setup where you would find this, because like the R26 and the GSX Mini, and especially the Berkeley Alpha and the HPA V281 are probably like way more expensive than most people are ever going to run this on, but it was just there to see what these are capable of. So let's talk about what they are capable of. The perceived sound signature here from a frequency response standpoint, not super neutral, it's not super far away from neutral either. There is a little bit of a mid-bass emphasis there, so a slightly elevated mid-bass, and then there's also a little bit of a shelf in the upper half of the mid-range, maybe a little bit into the lower treble range in there. And then the frequency extension in either direction is good, but not great. So there is a little bit of a sub-bass roll-off, but not a terrible one. And then like there's a little bit of a roll-off in the upper air frequencies, but not terrible. Okay, so a little bit of a mid-bass emphasis makes things like electric bass guitars and that sort of thing, kick drum hits and all of that stand out a little bit. The upper and mid-range shelf, and I call it a shelf and not a peak here, because the mid-range, particularly the upper half of it, manages to stand out a little bit and be a little bit emphasized, but to my very sensitive to these issues, seems to my ears, which are very sensitive to these, okay, doesn't seem to go shouty or honky much at all. So it's a little bit forward. Vocals and all of that can stand out a little bit and sound a little bit unnatural and a little bit hollow, but not real bad. Not to the point where I would say these have poor timbre. They don't have great vocal timbre, but it's also far from poor. Okay, so that's why I say it's more of a upper mid-range shelf instead of a peak, because I think it's that peakiness that comes in where you get a lot of shoutiness and honkiness, which these for the most part avoid. The treble range is probably about what would be close to like a Harman neutral. It's not forward at all. It's fairly well tonal balanced, because things like cymbal crashes and all of that have pretty good tonal balance to them, I would say, and fairly natural timbre. So what shape do you call that? Like, is it warm? Is it bright? Is it V-shaped? And all of that. Well, it's kind of like we'll go from your left to right. We have a little bit of a rolled sub bass and rolled off sub bass, and then a little bit of a mid bass hump, flattens out again, and then the upper half of the mid range is a little bit of a shelf, comes back down, and then like is kind of on the neutral range from there on out, though it does roll off just a little bit in the upper air, but not bad. Okay, I don't know what you want to describe that sound signature. So the other aspect of it, though, is that it is a fun listen from a dynamic standpoint. So those kick drum hits that I just mentioned have some good pop and hit to them. Like, they are fun. Okay, the presentation here is fairly active, energetic, lively throughout the entire frequency range. Like, you get some good snaps on snare drums and that sort of thing too. So I think that is a byproduct of the horn loading there, which I have another comment to make here in just a moment. All right, so if you like a little bit more forward, active, energetic kind of profile to your sound, then this one is a good one to check out. The soundstage here is not super wide. It's also not claustrophobic. It is not, I would say it's a little bit bigger than something like a Sennheiser HD600 series, okay? But it's also not very expansive either. It's like probably a little closer to the HD600 series in size, but I mean, it's not gonna touch like a HD800 kind of width either, not even close to that. And it does a fairly good job of imaging and pretty decent separation laterally. The depth in the layering is not absent, but it's not great. But that's fairly common for headphones in this price range anyway. But I would say like it's not quite 3D holographic, but it's decent in its imaging and its separation, at least laterally. Okay. And so forth. The resolution here, and then this is going to segue into the thing that we need to come back to about a thing I think the horn loading is doing. The resolution here I'll just call price appropriate. Like, everything that should be in there for an $800 headphone sounds like it is in there. It's not set the world on fire good. It is not poor. Are some hints of texturing and things like that, but it's not, you know, super well textured. But it does a fairly decent job, like resolving the finger actions on bass guitar, plucks, ghost notes, room reverbs, audience noise in live concerts, and like all of that kind of stuff. Like, it's in there to the extent that it needs to be. The presentation of it is a little bit interesting here. And this also ties into the dynamics of it, or at least specifically the dynamic range. The dynamic range on this one is compressed just a little bit. It's not that it gets super loud up top, it's that quiet low-level sounds are brought up a little bit more in presence. They're a little bit louder than they are in other headphones. I think this is probably just a mild acoustic amplification effect of the horn loading, but I am not 100% positive on that. That's just my best guess. So things that are normally quiet, low-level detail things in music, like sometimes room reverbs, some crowd noise, like seats creaking and all of that in an orchestral concert, you know, that sort of thing, they are a little bit higher in level and a little bit more noticeable. So why I used resolution to segue to that is to say that I don't think this is any more resolving than a lot of its competition. It's appropriately resolving, but not amazingly so. It's just that it can sound, it probably will sound to some like they are hearing things for the first time, even if they have heard other similarly priced gear, because that low-level detail stuff is brought up a little bit because of that dynamic range compression. Now, is that dynamic range compression bad or distracting in an absolute sense? It really didn't bother me when I was just sitting there listening to music, because as I said at the outset of this review, I really enjoyed listening to music through these headphones the vast majority of the time. It's just that when I started comparing these directly A/B to others and all of that, and some other times I'm like, you know, that background detail is not necessarily, there's not more of it. It's not presenting it in a better way. It's just, it's easier to hear. It's easier to tell that it's there. And that came out more when I did rapid A/B testing with other headphones, is that yes, the lower level of this, the lower level sounds are brought up a little bit. The upper, the louder stuff is still about the same loudness with volume matching as any other headphone. It's just that lower stuff is brought up. So a little bit of dynamic range compression does not bother me, but it is something that you should be aware of. All right, so let's get into some comparisons then. I mentioned the Australis over here. Apologies if I'm not pronouncing that right. I will go check its spelling and its pronunciation again. $900 US closeback. I'm still working on that review, so I'm not 100% ready to go on that one, but I will say that it is a bigger sound stager than this one. It has a similar difficulty with isolating external sounds and all that. It also does not fit as tightly on the head. So if you are working at an office and you have your head down, this one is going to slip off your head a lot more readily than the GH-40 will. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. I preferred I think the Australis had better bass extension and sub-bass presence and rumble. Again, this one's not poor at that, but this one had just a little bit more. The Australis is a little bit more naturally tuned through the mids, so vocals and all that sound a little bit more real to me than they do on this one. But this one overall, through the entire frequency range, I think is a little bit more active and lively, although that one might be just a slightly bit more impactful yet in the mid bass. Okay. So there are the combinations there, but I mean, it's within the range of, like, some people are going to like that this one has the vocals stand out a little bit more and that sort of thing. So it's the resolution difference between that one there, the Australis, and this one is maybe absent. I don't know which one actually is more resolving, if either is. They're both decent for what they need to be there. For other comparisons, I have the $430 Austrian Audio Hi X60, and then the $1,300 Focal Radiance, which this one right here is still my all-around favorite closed-back headphone, I would have to say. So with this one at $800, it kind of fits not quite halfway between these two in price, but reasonably close. The high X60 is narrower in stage yet and not quite as resolving as the GH-40 is, and the whole mid-range region of this is brought a little bit more forward rather than just the upper half, so it's a little bit better tonally balanced, but the entirety of the mid-range stands out a little bit more on the high X60 than it does the GH-40, which probably comes from the fact that this one is more targeted towards a professional audience who wants that mid-range to stand out a little bit more. And then again, like the resolution here, it's a noticeable step up going from here to here in resolution. This does pull out more, even though this has that sort of like bring the quiet stuff louder, that dynamic range compression a little bit, which this one does not have. All right, this one, however, is just not yet still in the league of the $1,300 Radiance. The Radiance is still bigger in stage and much more holographic. Better imaging and separation laterally, more depth and layering this way. It has a bass shelf, so it has a lot more sub-bass presence and rumble than this one does because of that bass shelf. And it still has the fun dynamics in the low end, similar to like this one does, but it also is just much more lush in its presentation and more naturally tuned. So it has a much more natural timbre to it throughout the whole frequency range than this one does. Again, this is just in another league than this one, but it should be, since, you know, it's half again as much money as the GH-40 is. That should not be too surprising. Okay. So let's put a little bow on this one here. The Kennerton Gjallarhorn GH-40 horn-loaded dynamic driver closed back $800 headphone. Overall, I like it. Okay, it's not tuned for everyone. Its tuning is going to work for some, and it's not going to work for others. It does a fairly good job of holding sound in, but it does let in a fair amount of external ambient noise there. I think it travels reasonably well. It could be a good travel companion. It is super easy to drive. Okay, so little dongle DACs and all of that power this thing just fine. And it sounds pretty good. A little bit of mid-bass emphasis, a little bit of emphasis in the upper half of the mid-range, but still manages to avoid being shouty and honky most of the time. Decent resolution on it, some fun and lively dynamics to the presentation, a slight bit of dynamic range compression, which is just bringing quiet sounds up a little bit in comparison with its competition, but also those wood cups are beautiful. It just looks nice and it's comfortable and all of that too. So this being my first experience with a Kennerton headphone, I like it, and I look forward to hearing more from Kennerton, so I hope I get the chance to do so. So we'll go ahead and leave it there. I am Wave Theory. This has been my review of the Kennerton Gjallarhorn GH-40. Please remember to like this video if you haven't yet. Leave a comment down below. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Check out my PayPal and my Patreon to help support the channel. And just generally do those things you do to support YouTube channels. And as always, enjoy the music.